So, what could be your reason for continuing seeking? Which is a bit of a crazy one because, let's be honest, everybody wants to let go of their seeking, and obviously find or realize what's being what's being sought, um, and yet there's even more and more people seeking now, and simply saying things like "let go," it just is as it is, and the whole idea of grace will descend upon you as and how it will descend upon you because let's be honest, we don't have a choice, doesn't seem to be working. And one of the reasons for that is because we create a reality and we invest in this reality, to the point that being asked to let go of this reality sometimes isn't just going to do the job. And something I've recently been talking to people about is examining the reasons as to why they are in their current reality, why they are, in a sense, seeking, because obviously there is some benefit, there is some security, there is some worth that's attained from being in this current reality. Now, this is something you can apply across the board, whether it's your financial situation, the relationships you're in, but obviously I want to look at it from the point of view of seeking, because let's be honest, everybody now seems to know everything. We've all read the books. We've all been to as many satsangs as humanly possible, sat with as many teachers as humanly possible, looked at as many traditions as humanly possible. And yet what we find is with all of that talk, with all that chatter, a lot of us are still seeking. A lot of us are still in this place where, wow, we could do a talk possibly even better than the speaker who's or the teacher that's on the stage, and yet we're still there trying to figure it out. And one of the reasons I've been saying to people examine the reasons is because you've put this current reality in place, and maybe because it's giving you that sense of security and that sense of worth, it's not in your interest to dislodge that. Because when a teacher says let go, you're being asked to let go of all these stories, and all these stories and dramas and ideas and thoughts and concepts that you've got in place. And that's something that you invested a lot of time and energy into, no doubt. When I was seeking, I remember, even though I so wanted to find, there was some real worth in my story for me to continue seeking, because it got me the love I wanted, it got me the attention. It was poor Zach. He's this guy who's seeking, or better still, he's not even seeking. Oh, he's this poor unfortunate guy, and I, in a sense, without realizing it, was reveling in this misery because it gave me some sense of worth. It gave me some security, as perverse as that may sound. And the seeker is kind of, in a sense, engaged in something very, very similar, because when the arguments are, in a sense, presented or discussion happens during meetings, most people realize that they don't know what they're seeking for, and if they're asked to identify what they feel is missing, it's incredible why it's incredible as to why there isn't any answers as to what could possibly be missing. That's where, yes, okay, maybe what we could look to do is look at the reasons as to why we're doing what we're doing, why we're going to all these satsangs or these meetings or these mehfils, or sitting with Sufis, or sitting with non-duality teachers or Buddhists or what have you, trying furiously to get enlightened. What are your reasons for doing this? And if we can have an honest conversation with ourselves as to why we are looking, to do this, what we may find is we might find our true motivation for seeking and our true motivation for doing this. And then that can, if we sit with it, because remember, it's not a race, be patient. We can sit with it and see whether it's something that we can then eventually let go. Because yes, okay, the whole idea of saying let go, it's just this and what have you, it works, and it works effectively because there are people waking up, but it presupposes the whole idea that at some point in some space of time that something may happen, because a seeker, it's incredible how they have the critical faculties to come to a meeting, but when it comes to actually trying to do something to wake up, they want to negate it all and say, well, it's completely choiceless, I've no choice, there's no choice me coming here and all this stuff, in a sense giving over your power to something which again you've not identified what you're giving your power over to. Because sometimes it can be the teacher, sometimes it can just be, well, consciousness is just happening. Yes, it is just happening, but sometimes we can, if we're seeking, use that as an excuse not to do some real work into ourselves. Self-inquiry, which is a very popular method, although people just see self-inquiry as just a question, who am I, self-inquiry can be expansive as well, and it means that we can self-inquire as to why we are doing what we're doing, what the reasons are, and then slowly but surely put them down. Not like the proverbial peeling back the layers of the onions, because I'm fully aware of the fact that yes, okay, by asking people to examine reasons, it could start another thing whereby people are then, well, okay, I've got to now self-introspect, look at this, see what happened when I was 2-3 years old. So it can become another merry-go-round. But if it's used authentically, in the sense of as and how it comes up, So not as an actual technique or a method, although I have talked of it being a method in previous videos, as well as, like the whole idea of there's no seeking, there's no this, no that, being another method. But in a sense, picking up and putting out these methods as and how you feel fit. Again, that's kind of in a sense sort of asking you to take that power back and realize that you know what you're doing. Because one of the questions I've asked in the past is if your consciousness, if everything is consciousness, you're this consciousness, why did you then choose to split? Why did you then choose to put this reality into place? And by looking at it and by inquiring authentically, not sitting as a chapter and verse technique, because that can be something else that can create another, it can create, God, what's the word I'm looking for? It can create another, I don't know, crutch. By just allowing it to happen as and how it happens, what we can do is actually identify why it is what we're doing. As I've said at a lot of talks, one of the biggest breakthroughs for me was when I realized I wanted to be free. Prior to that, I was happy to be in the service of a teacher, and do whatever was required of me without any rhyme or reasons, to, in a sense, trust in the truest sense. But then when it came to its logical conclusion, the thought that, hold on, I really do want to know what this guy knows, really got rid of a lot of my seeking, and then made me go inwards to have a real conversation with myself. As I say to people, there is a teacher that can call you out, and that teacher is actually you. And one of the things that we can do with this whole idea of inquiring as to why we're doing what we're doing is to start actually engaging ourselves in an honest conversation. And what you'll find there is, in that honest conversation, it will be beyond time and space. It's going to happen as and how it's going to happen. And a lot of the questions that you can ask in a meeting, you're not going to be able to ask of yourself, because you already know. So you will, in a sense, be able to call yourself out on your bullshit a lot faster than sitting there in a room. But it takes time, it takes patience, it takes being good to yourself, and it takes trusting. Because a lot of people are always kind of saying, well, how do I go inwards? And it's like, but you've just been to about 300 meetings. And the answer is quite simple. Just trust yourself. Just sit with it and see what happens. Because this whole thing is about getting you to ask the question, what would I do, as opposed to what would the teacher do? That's why it's self-realization. As I always say, the clue is in the title. It's, in a sense, taking power back for what you actually are. And that is empowering.